They'll take all of that into consideration and make a final decision and hire. So I'm very happy to announce our first candidate today, Maddie Abbott, who will come up and speak.
Hey, everybody. Whoa. Is this on? Hello. All right, we got it. Hello, everyone. It's so good to see you. I can't believe you're here. Nixon 5, right? Let's go. All right. Honestly, props to all of you for showing up. I did not expect this. I feel honored. Was anybody out in the streets last night celebrating? Yes? Yes? I was finishing some work for today, but my parents live on the 41st floor in Hell's Kitchen, and I could just hear screams from the ground. And so I knew that they were making a comeback because I could hear every couple of minutes, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think they might win. But I was just hearing, and then I went out on the street. It was crazy out there last night. Anyway, blessings to you, and thank you to everyone for your thoughts and prayers. I did, in fact, I know it doesn't look like it, I did, in fact, have poison ivy all over my face earlier this week. But I was like, get me a doctor, get me a Pentecostal. They cleared it up. It was Jesus or steroids or both. Thankfully, I am here. So it's a blessing to be here with you today. My name is Maddie. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the ministry assistant here at the River. And today, as Nasa just said, I'm also a candidate for the associate pastor role. So I'm looking forward to chatting with all of you later. Don't grill me too hard. So we're in a sermon series called Practicing the Way of Love, and the question that we have been sitting with throughout this series is what it actually looks like to love people the way that Jesus did in our actual lives. What does love look like in our day to day? So today, I want to talk about something that I think gets in the way of that love. It's something that most of us experience with some amount of frequency, I think. I know I've experienced it throughout my life, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's something that I call the temptation of unbelonging. What do I mean by that? It's the feeling we get when we sense that we don't belong, and the temptation to then try to belong in ways that might betray our values, betray our worth in God, betray the people who God has called us to love. It's the temptation to conform, to cave to social pressure, even and especially when we feel like we don't measure up or we're being excluded. It's the temptation of unbelonging, or as C.S. Lewis would call it, the temptation of the inner ring. Many of you probably know who C.S. Lewis is. He's the author of the Chronicles of Narnia series. He was a Christian writer and theologian. C.S. Lewis gave a lecture in 1944 called The Inner Ring. And in it, he observed that in many human institutions, whether it's workplaces or just social circles or families, there is an invisible kind of social structure that takes up a lot of space in our imaginations. So there's this line, right, between who is truly in and the people who aren't. There's an inner circle, and he calls it the inner ring. And what Lewis noticed is that most of the time, we don't explicitly name or acknowledge that this line, this inner ring, exists. It's kind of unspoken. Nobody tells you where it is or how to cross it. You just kind of feel it. You can sense it. You can sense that there is a line between people who belong and people who don't. And you can sense that you might be on the wrong side of that line. You feel the warmth when you get a little bit closer to the line, and you feel the chill when you move away from it. So Lewis says that in all people's lives at certain periods, and in many people's lives at all periods, between infancy and extreme old age, one of the most dominant elements is the desire to be inside the local ring and the terror of being left outside. The terror of being left outside the inner ring. I think that's right. I think most of us know that terror. Even if we've never had a name for it, I think it shows up in a lot of different ways for people. You may have felt it at work, where there's a culture that you either fit or you're working to fit, and you find yourself kind of making all of these small adjustments, laughing at the right moments, mentioning the right things, or hiding the parts of yourself that you feel like might not land. Maybe you felt it in social circles. I'm thinking about the parent groups at my friends' kids' schools where there's this pressure to kind of publicly parent in a certain kind of way, and it's constant and it's subtle, and you find yourself making all kinds of little changes that you might not otherwise make. Maybe you felt it as a woman or as a Black, Hispanic, or Asian person, or as a person who came here from another country, or a person whose first language isn't English. You find yourself walking on eggshells, making these little adjustments all the time in environments that weren't made for you. And I know specifically, it's Pride Month, a lot of queer people experience this in a very particular way. You start noticing that when you dress in a way that conforms with gender expectations, people treat you differently. They might be warmer or more open. The room receives you just a little bit more easily. And when you start presenting in ways that push against that, you notice a bit of a shift. People might not respond as positively to you, as enthusiastically. They're not mean about it, but maybe they're a little bit more confused by you, a little less enthusiastic about you. Or when you hold hands with your partner in public in certain places or in front of certain people, you can just feel people looking at you a little bit differently or nervously or not really knowing what to do with you. And it's tempting in those moments to turn back, right? It's tempting to say, well, what's the big deal? I'll just wear something different. I'll just not hold hands in certain places. In the grand scheme of things, what does it matter? These are small things. There are bigger problems in the world. These are small sacrifices. It's worth it to belong. I know that temptation well. But these little things that we do to fit in, they add up, they chip away at us, and they make it harder to love. I think it can sometimes feel like giving in to the temptation to belong is a gift that we're giving to the people around us, but it actually makes us less loving. And so I want to look today at why that is, what makes us less loving when we're just outside the inner ring looking in, and how we might combat the temptation to try to be inside of it. So today we're going to look at that through a story in the Bible from the book of Daniel. This is one of my favorite stories. It's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So let's dive in. So a little context before we get into it. The book of Daniel is about Jewish people living in Babylonian exiles. So the Israelites, after a lot of ups and downs with various kings, after many cycles of obedience and disobedience to God, after practicing all kinds of idolatry, after all of that, the Israelites were finally conquered by the Babylonians, and they were sent into exile. So they're forcibly removed from their homes, and they now have to live inside of a foreign empire with its own gods and culture and power structures. So Daniel specifically is one of the Israelites who was taken into exile. But Daniel is special. Daniel is selected by the Babylonian king, by King Nebuchadnezzar, for special service. He's selected to come and live in the king's court and to be trained for government service because he's been identified as someone who is smart and talented. So he goes to live in the king's court in this foreign land to serve this king who's conquered him. And he's selected alongside 3 of his friends who have also been identified as these especially smart, talented people. His 3 friends are named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so already these 4 people, these specially selected Israelites, they know they're special, they are different, they are worthy, they've been chosen to be part of a kind of inner ring, right, that a lot of people are not part of. But at the same time, there is also an inner ring that they are not part of. They're not Babylonians, even though they're serving in the Babylonian court. And so there's always this temptation nagging at them in exile, this temptation to be part of this more inner ring that they are just on the outside of. That's how they have to live. And so the question that the book of Daniel keeps returning to is, how do you stay who God made you to be inside a system that wants you to be someone else? How do you hold on to your identity and your integrity and your agape love for others in that situation? I like the books in the Bible that are about exile. I preached last year a little bit about exile because I think a lot of people I know feel like they are in some kind of exile, right? They're trying to make their way in a world that is unfamiliar to them. They've had to hide parts of themselves to be successful or to survive. They're in exile from themselves or from communities they love for all kinds of reasons. Queer people who have been ostracized from the churches where they grew up know this. My very straight dad, who worked his way up in a business world that was culturally foreign to him, also knows this. This is something that I think a lot of us experience in different ways. Here at the River, we have a lot of people who have found all kinds of success in exile, right? We have a lot of very smart, talented, hardworking people here, people who have survived and made a way through all kinds of really challenging situations. And so maybe you can relate a little bit to Daniel and to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these special people who've made their way into an inner ring, but who still find themselves standing outside of so many others. That's an extremely tempting place to be, and that's the place where our story starts today. So I'm going to read you the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. King Nebuchadnezzar made a golden statue whose height was 60 cubits and whose width was 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. The herald proclaimed aloud, "You are to fall down and worship the golden statue that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire." Therefore, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden statue. Accordingly, at this time, certain Chaldeans came forward and denounced the Jews. "There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men pay no heed to you, O king. They do not serve your gods, and they do not worship the golden statue that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought in. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, and you do not worship the golden statue that I have set up? If you do not worship, you shall immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. If our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was so filled with rage. He ordered the furnace heated up 7 times more than was customary and ordered some of the strongest guards in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to throw them into the furnace of the blazing fire. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up quickly. He said to his counselors, "Was it not 3 men that we threw bound into the fire?" They answered the king, "True, O king." He replied, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the middle of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the 4th has the appearance of a god." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out." And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their tunics were not scorched, and not even the smell of fire came from them. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. They disobeyed the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own." Has anybody seen the VeggieTales version of this? Yes, we have one in the back. Okay, this is actually my favorite VeggieTales episode. So it's the one where Bob the tomato, Larry the cucumber, and Junior asparagus all get thrown into a furnace because they refuse to worship a giant chocolate bunny. They work at a chocolate factory, and their boss is like, "You got to worship the giant chocolate bunny," and they're like, "No." So they get thrown into a furnace and they survive. Anyway, Wonderful VeggieTales episode. Highly recommend. Moving on. Whether you have watched the VeggieTales version of this or you have just read this version for the first time ever, there's a way that this story normally gets read, right? So this is normally a story about boldly taking a stand, making your mark, standing up for what is right. That's what it means to be a prophet. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were prophetic. They were told to worship this golden statue, and they said, no, throw us in the furnace. We think God will save us, but even if that doesn't happen, we're not going back. And so they get thrown in this fire, and they miraculously survive. That's bold, that's brave. It makes you think about all the people right now around the world who are taking bold stands. I am specifically thinking about the people in ICE detention at Delaney Hall in Newark. I don't know if you've seen this in the news. There's a group of ICE detainees at Delaney Hall in Newark who are on a hunger and work strike in protest of their conditions and of the illegal circumstances of their detention, the denial of their rights. I was at Delaney Hall a couple weeks ago, in solidarity with that strike, and I do think that this is a story about those people, right? This is a story about those people, for sure. This has always been a story about the people who are boldly standing against injustice, risking everything to stand true to who God has made them to be, and I think that there is a lot that we can learn from those people. But I also think that that is not most of our lives, right? Not for many of us, not most of the time. Most of us are not standing in front of a king with a furnace behind us. We're not facing threats of coercive violence. Most of us are standing in a meeting or at a happy hour or in a group chat, and the pressure we feel is not all that dramatic. It's just this constant low hum of the inner ring making its preferences known. And I think that this story is about those situations too. This is a story about the moments when we could turn back and be someone who we're not in God to please others or to fit in. Because being a prophet is also about those moments too, that might seem very little, but that add up to quite a lot. There are so many harmful systems and so much pain and suffering that are built on a million little decisions we make every day about what we're going to sacrifice to belong, what we're going to say, how we're going to show up, what we're going to buy, who we're going to love. And we're often making those decisions almost unconsciously, constantly tempted by the prospect of the inner ring. Lewis says if we don't confront the temptation of the inner ring, the desire to be part of it will run your life. Why is this desire of the inner ring so powerful? I think it's natural to want to belong. This isn't a bad thing. We all want to feel like we fit in, like we're loved for who we are. That's a natural feeling. But when that desire starts to run your life, it becomes a monster, I think, really quickly. It's because we see the people inside of inner rings as golden people, right? We worship them in a way, even as we resent them. We have made them into something. They seem to have figured out something that we haven't. They seem to move through the world with an ease and a confidence that we want to be near. And somewhere in the back of our minds is this thought that says, they have this whole thing figured out and I don't, so there must be something wrong with me. We idolize them and then we feel ashamed. When you make other people golden, you become ashamed that you're not golden. There must be something you've done wrong, some reason why you don't move through the world with as much ease as they do. What is it? Why am I not that? What did I do, God? I must have misunderstood who you wanted me to be. That's what makes the inner ring so hard to resist, because you're not just trying to get access to a group, you're trying to fix what feels like a fundamental deficit within yourself. And when you see someone as golden, of course you'll reshape yourself to get close to them. You're not being shallow, you're doing what human beings have always done, which is to find something that looks like it has the answer and to orient your whole life around it. And it might even, in certain moments, feel like you're getting closer to God, right? because you're getting rewarded for caving to this temptation. You're getting affirmed for making choices that cut away at who you are in God. It's hard to tell what's from God and what's not when you're just outside the inner ring, because there's always that shame and resentment that's clouding your judgment. I've had a few careers at this point. I worked in Hollywood as an assistant. I've worked on a lot of political campaigns. I was a middle school math teacher for a couple of years, and I've worked for a couple of different tech companies. And in every single one of those careers, there was an inner ring that I was just on the outside of. And there were moments when I could feel myself inside of it, moments when I would get promoted or told that I was so talented and bright and wow, if I just kept going, what a future I would have. There were those moments when someone would look at me and say, you are someone who gets it. And in those moments, I would feel really proud of myself, right? Because I'd worked really hard for that kind of affirmation. But it was never enough, right? Even as I kept ascending and getting into rings more inner and inner, it was never enough. All I wanted was more. I couldn't get enough affirmation. Because when your life is run by the desire to be in the inner ring, there will always be another more inner ring that you are not in. It's never enough. That desire just feeds on itself, and it drives you to do things that are increasingly big to fit in, that aren't loving to yourself, to God, or to your neighbor. I found myself in situations where I was betraying my values, betraying other people I cared about in little ways. And beyond that, I was betraying who I was in God, and that ate away at me. I was ashamed, and that shame turned into resentment. Isn't it funny how that happens? How the more you're affirmed, the more ashamed you can actually feel. It's counterintuitive, but I think it happens a lot. And shame, I find, normally turns into resentment. I was resentful of the people who had so much more than me, even though I had so much. And when you are carrying both of those things, the shame and the resentment, loving your neighbor becomes nearly impossible. You're too defensive, you're too focused on proving yourself. The inner ring doesn't just cost you yourself, it costs the people around you something they may not even be able to name. Nebuchadnezzar didn't build a statue of a nobody. He built something that looked powerful and permanent and worth bowing to. And everyone bowed, because that is what we do when we encounter something golden, right? Something that we think might be God. And the question that this story is asking is, what happens when you stop seeing them as golden? What happens when you look at the statue and think, that's just metal? That's just a person. That's just a room that has decided it gets to tell me what I'm worth. It's been almost 4 years since I showed up here at the river, and when I showed up here, I was not in great shape. I was working at a tech company where I'd risen the ranks pretty quickly. I'd gotten into a lot of inner rings myself, but it just wasn't enough. I was still on the outside of so many, and I was mad. I was insatiable. And it had driven me to be kind of a sad and lonely person with almost no actual friends. I was not loving my neighbor, even though I thought I was, because I was working really hard. And over the past few years, I've gone on a journey deconstructing my own obsession with inner rings. It's interesting. I didn't grow up in an evangelical church or in a conservative church, but when there was a deconstruction life group here at the river, I started to show up just because I needed somewhere to be. And what I found was that I actually had a lot in common with the people who did come from those backgrounds. Quite a lot, actually, because we are all deconstructing the temptations of the inner ring. It looks different, but we are all doing it in different ways. Deconstruction can feel like you are being thrown into a furnace. And you think to yourself, I pray I don't burn up. I pray it won't always feel like this. I pray God gets me through it. But I am honestly not sure what will happen. I don't know. There have been a number of moments over the past few years that have felt like a furnace as I've navigated a lot of transitions in my life. And through it all, I have been so blessed to have people in this community in the furnace with me. People who are brilliant and kind and loving and prophetic and so full of God. People who are all on their own journeys, many of them very different from my own, but that feel more similar than they should at times. I have been blessed to be around so many people who are asking their own very thoughtful questions about how God is moving in their lives. I've been blessed by your questions because they've given me permission to ask my own. I've been blessed by your wisdom, by the way you fearlessly share your experiences of God, because it's helped me see God in unlikely places. And it's helped me to discern what is God and what isn't. I've been blessed to share a lot of Wednesday lunches with some of you that made me pause and remember who I am on days when that felt distant. I've been blessed to spend many nights at life groups just being around other friendly faces in moments when the furnace felt really hot. And I have been blessed to bear witness to the ways in which all of you, so many of you, are boldly living your witness out in the world, forging your own prophetic paths. And all of those blessings have grounded me. They've made it easier to look at the inner rings around me and say, you are not golden, you are just people too. And when I'm able to do that, I don't feel as ashamed anymore. And when I feel less ashamed, then I feel less resentful of other people who seem to have it all figured out, but who don't, not really. They're all on the outside of some inner ring we don't even see yet. And when we're less resentful, we can love them just as God loves us, because we're able to love God first, actual God, not some golden replica. What was that golden statue anyway? Some scholars have actually pointed out that the golden statue Nebuchadnezzar built was 60 cubits tall and 6 cubits wide. That's not actually structurally sound, right? It's too tall and skinny. It would probably fall over. Is it even real in the way that we think of it? Whatever golden statue is tempting you right now, whatever inner ring feels especially enticing, know that God is with you as you stand firm and rooted in who God made you to be. God loves you very much. God is right there, even if it doesn't feel like it. And whatever furnace you are going through right now, we are here for you too. Amen. We're going to be here for you. No matter what happens, the river's here to be with you through that. That's what we're here for. We're here to remind you of the miracle that no one is golden, the absolute gift that not a single one of us is God. We don't have to keep clawing at the outskirts of these inner rings because we don't have to be God. Because God became human out of love for us, but God graciously, thankfully, became a single human, not just any human. God became Jesus Christ, who would give up access to every single inner ring just to be near you. So as you go out into the world this week with all of its temptations, in the moments when you're faced with choices about whether and what to bow to, I hope that you can take 3 things with you. You are loved just the way you are, even when it might not feel that way. Other people are not golden, even if they seem that way. And there are people here to remind you of those things when the furnace feels really hot. Happy Pride Month. With that, I'd like to invite the worship team back up as I close us out in prayer. God, we come to you as people who want to belong, and you know that wanting. You made us for each other, and that desire is not the problem. But God, you know the performances we've been keeping up, the things we haven't said, the moments we went quiet when we should have spoken, the people we did not show up for because we were too busy managing our image with the people above us. For the person who is carrying shame about who they are, who has decided that somewhere along the way that the real version of them needs to be edited before it's safe to show, God, tell them the truth. Tell them that they are already enough. For the person who is carrying resentment, who is exhausted from performing and furious that it still isn't working, God, meet them in that exhaustion and give them back themselves. For the person doing the daily prophetic work of just showing up as themselves in rooms that would prefer they didn't, let them know that work matters, that it is seen, that it has the same shape as what those 3 men did in Babylon. And God, for the person who is in the furnace right now, who has told the truth and paid for it, who has refused to bow and who has lost something because of it, remind them that they are not in there alone, that there is a 4th figure in that fire and that not even the smell of smoke will remain. God, Give us the but if not kind of faith, not certainty that everything will work out, but the freedom that comes from not needing this particular room to tell us who we are. Make this church a place where nobody has to perform to belong, where we practice together what it means to stay ourselves. In the name of Jesus, who has never managed anyone's impression of him and whose love was bigger for it, amen.